well as our honored guests, Bob Morgan and Jeff Morris and Jeannie and their family and Bud Kelleher and so many. I look around the room and everybody I look at has been a big part somehow in working with the airport over the years. And you know, Bob Morgan, Bob in 1978 did the first mural that we have up above right here, the Crossing the Divide. You know, we're going to celebrate 100 years of that event here in September 30th. It'll be 100 years since Cromwell-Dixon took off and flew over the Continental Divide. In fact, I heard 5 airplanes up there today flying around with young kids showing them where the Cromwell-Dixon site is. So a lot of interest growing in that event. And then, of course, we did the old terminal mural that's over there on the wall. Bob did that when we took the building down. We had to move forward, but we wanted to remember that building. And then, of course, behind us, you know, we've got these 2 beautiful paintings that Jeff and Bob put the deal together. I don't know, it's been a year now, I suppose, since that was done, but just super historical events at the airport. And, you know, Jeff and his family have been at the airport really since the beginning, Red Morrison being back here, first airport manager. So there was one good airport manager. Well, 2, accountant Bud, sorry. But anyway, we're excited to have 2 new paintings today to add to the collection that actually the Jeff Morrison family has commissioned Bob Morgan to do, and then they're on loan to us. The first one is the Carroll College Morrison Flying Service World War II training program painting. And you know, in the early 40s, the young men in Helena were all going to war. They were joining, they were being drafted. Carroll College, Tom McCarville's here from Carroll College. It was an all-male college at the time. And I'm looking back at the photographs of the college. It was a pretty barren space. So I mean, you can be really proud of where Carroll College has come since, you know, the 1940s. It's a beautiful campus today. And that was an issue because the men weren't there available to go to school. Morrison Flying Service had been in business. Their business had slacked off. The government actually came in and took airplanes from fixed base operators like Morrison Flying Service because they needed them for the war activities. And then you had the Helena School of Aeronautics, which is now UM of Helena. And again, you can see the improvements that have happened at UM of Helena. What a great facility that is. Dan Bingham is here today representing Helena, or the UM Helena. But the School of Aeronautics did the mechanical work on those aircraft. Morrison Flying Service partnered up with Carroll College. They did the training. And, you know, more than 30 airplanes here. It was really a big event. And so we have a painting there. Before we unveil that, I'll tell you a little more about the other one, the As They Round the Far Turn. And that's a great one, too. That's a depiction from 1921 out at the fairgrounds when, you know, the fairgrounds, some of my ex-commissioners are out of town today that are now commissioners at the fairgrounds. And, you know, they used to have a really nice track out there that they tore up, right? Murray, no. But in this particular case, they had these open wheel race cars, and Ed Follansbee, who's credited with having the first aircraft in Helena, Montana. And he did a number of things. If you read the early aviation history, you'll see Ed's name come up time and time again. So they had a race out there at the fairgrounds, and actually we have a photograph over here of that actual race, and I think that's what Bob probably used for his information. But maybe I could get Jeff to come up and say a few words about this. Jeff's really played a key role, Jeff, Jeannie, his family, in putting together this nice display we have of historic events. So Jeff?
Yeah, if you want to, let's take this one down.
Okay, we'll do it. Now you got to tell me when it gets straight.
This was in 1921 in the fairgrounds, and it was a race between these race cars and Ed Follansbee and his Curtis Jenny. And Follansbee also, this is him on the ladder when Lindbergh came to town. When they were out at the old Bill Roberts golf course when the airport was there. So he was I would say probably you'd consider him the the father of aviation in Helena at one time. He's the one that really got people interested and got things going in Helena. And this is a picture of Ed Follansbee and his Jenny, signed by him, which I had, and the picture that we used to do the painting. And one of the other interesting things about this is one of the race cars that Follansbee was racing was owned by a fellow by the name of Eddie Gallivan. And Eddie Gallivan owned a restaurant down on Main Street called Eddie's Cafe. And he also was interested in automobiles, and so we don't know which one, but I assume maybe it's the first one that was Eddie Gallivan's car. But he was quite a guy, and kind of took over the golf course out there for quite a while. Built the hangars that were on the golf course that later became storage for the golf carts for a number of years. Want to do this one, Vaughn? Let's do this one. Now, in the 1940s, the first program that was started was the CPT program, Civilian Pilot Training Program, which was partnered with Carroll College. And it trained a number of civilian pilots to get ready for the war effort, because we knew that this was probably coming down the pike, and there weren't any pilots, and there really weren't too many airplanes at that time. But and then after that, we got into the Navy program at Carroll, the V-12 and V-7 programs that were instituted up there, and trained Navy officers and also some of the pilots. This picture is a picture that Les Jordan took of the airplanes sitting out there. There's about 30 airplanes at that time that were here for that training program. And they were all brought in. We didn't own any of them. They were all brought in just for the training program. Here's the original terminal building that's now out at Montana City. This smokestack's at the roundhouse that used to be there. And the original hangar that was built in 1928 when they opened the airport. And the School of Aeronautics. The School of Aeronautics has kind of an interesting background, and my dad came here in 1931 and went into business, and soon thereafter he decided that he needed some help, and particularly in the maintenance of his airplanes, and so a fellow by the name of Bill Farner joined him into business. And he and Bill Farner started a program at the high school, in the basement of the old high school that's set up across from the cathedral. They started an aviation program up there for the kids, and it was a very successful program. They trained a lot of young men to fly, and then the school decided to build a building at the airport, and when they did, Bill Farner became the first principal of the School of Aeronautics. And he was the leader of that school during the war effort. And although we trained several hundred pilots during the war, the School of Aeronautics trained a few thousand mechanics and welders for the shipbuilding industry and for the airplane factories in Seattle. So this was really a booming time. And Bill Farner's daughter is here this morning, Liz Andrews. Wave your hands. So this line of fellows here, these were the instructors. So you can see what a big program this really was at that time. We used to take the airplanes, as many as we could get at night, and put them in the hangar on their nose, stack them up on their nose, one right behind the other, just like cordwood in there. Carroll College, of course, was a great part of this, and a fellow that doesn't get a lot of recognition that probably should for keeping Carroll College going during the war, and is Father Emmett Riley. And Father Riley and my dad are the ones that put this program together, and he's the one that kept it going after my father was killed and my mother came into the business. So he was a real rock as far as keeping Carroll going, and they very easily could have had some real problems if Father Riley hadn't been there to keep these programs going. I think that's all I have.
Bob?
Just one quick thing. One of the students that was in the CPT program in 1940 came to us from Billings, and he later went on to Boeing and became their chief test pilot. And I was trying to think of his name.
Jack Waddell.
Jack Waddell. Jack Waddell learned to fly here and became the chief test pilot at Boeing when my son was there working in the flight test department.
Hold that mic up.
I think we get a little bit connected. This was a great project. It started out with just one piece, and look what we ended up with. And I'm no salesman. It was really great to work with these people to do this. I knew and had some relationship with almost every event on here, and when I needed the real details, I either got a hold of Jeff or Bud, one of the two. And not only did I get the details, I also got a lot of advice on how to do it. I have a connection with this, believe it or not. The commander of the Navy V-12 program was Lieutenant Darling. Lieutenant Darling, he had a son who was 6'7", sophomore in high school when I was. I came to about his navel, and we played basketball. He went on to great things. I went back to the bench. But that's, I can remember this. I remember when they had the people flying and so on, and it was great. We used to go by this hangar just about every other day. We lived in the valley at that time, and we'd go by the hangar. And I can remember the old Blue Jenny that used to sit outside there, and I saw that fly a few times. Matter of fact, I think it might have been Follinsby, I'm not sure, that landed on our ranch one day. He had a little problem, and he landed in one of the fields, and he came over and he asked my dad, he said, "All right, if I leave the plane there?" And Dad said, "Well, there's no way to get it out, you might as well." And this piece over here, the race, the funny thing, these cars were what they called open fender race car. There are no fenders, they just raced, that's all. And this, when I did this, I had this plane at this angle, and it didn't work. Everything stopped. And I looked at that, looked at it. Finally, I thought, I'm going to try it the other way. Maybe it'll work over there. And I did. I was about that big when she came to town. And my father bought my brother and I each helmet with goggles so that we could come up and meet Amelia Earhart. But we never got to meet her. I stood behind a guy who was about 6'3" and about that wide. I didn't see anything until she was leaving. And my brother and I were standing there, and she was about from here to the cameras, I guess. And she saw my brother and I standing there with our helmets and goggles, and she went like this as she went by. So You can say I met a meteor.